Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us today, and welcome back to Chatting with Charlie Live for our reaction on the June Visa Bulletin. I'm here with WR's Director of Visa Consulting, Charlie Oppenheim, and we're excited to talk through what the June Visa Bulletin means for HR immigration and global mobility folks tuning in today. Before we get started, though, a couple of housekeeping items. First, Charlie and I host a podcast called The Bulletin that is released every Tuesday, and it's a spinoff of our Chatting with Charlie series, where we go deeper for listeners on the Visa Bulletin, corporate green card sponsorship policies, government regulations, and much more. So if you're interested, please consider following the podcast on Spotify or subscribing to WR Immigration on YouTube. Second, we do a special HR Q&A episode of the Bulletin podcast every month. So you can either put them in the comments or DM your questions directly, and we'll answer them in an upcoming episode. We also have a survey to submit questions, so we'll make sure that and the links to follow the podcast are in the comment section below. Okay, let's now dive into the June Visa Bulletin. Okay, Charlie, what did we see or any movement that happened for the employment-based categories?
Not very much movement. There was no movement in any of the China employment dates. And for India, the only movement of India dates was the India 3rd and India EW dates advanced 1 week to August 22nd of 2012. That 1 week advancement is what we had been predicting was likely to occur. And there was no movement on the rest of world dates for the month of June. They all stayed the same.
So in terms of your predictions you gave last time, is this aligned?
Pretty much, because I mentioned that up to, 1 week, for example, in the India 3rd preference, up to 1 week in certain other categories, and with those 1 weeks being an average of for the months of June through September. The one thing that is somewhat surprising is it was announced that there is likely to be a retrogression of the rest of world employment 2nd and employment 3rd preference final action dates for the month of July. This is somewhat of a mystery why this would happen after such a rapid advance of the April date, only to begin retrogressing the dates a few months, 2-3 months later. It would seem to have been more prudent to advance the April date at a more conservative rate to try to avoid future retrogressions. But again, unfortunately, that didn't happen, and it's indicated that it is likely that the rest of world 2nd and 3rd preference employment dates will be retrogressed.
Yeah, and that's the notes in D&E in the Visa Bulletin. And when you look at the Visa Bulletin right now, 2nd preference, rest of world, is January 15, 2023. And then 3rd is November 22nd, 2022. What are you thinking? How far back will they retrogress it?
Will be an interesting thing. I would not be surprised if they went back maybe as much as July 1st of 2022. But it's hard to say. Hopefully they will retrogress the date to a point where they can hold it for the remainder of the year in a worst case scenario, and possibly once they retrogress it, maybe if things change in subsequent months in terms of demand, maybe they could advance it a little bit from there. But typically what I would do when I made a retrogression, it would be kind of become a line in the sand where I would not have to go any further back, and in a worst case scenario would hold it. But again, these two retrogressions are not what we were expecting based on the forward movement that had been occurring in the January through April timeframe with the rapid advancements and the indication of what the application filing dates, which had been announced back in October, were. Again, these retrogressions at this time are somewhat unexpected. The fact that these two dates are retrogressing, it is a indication that rest of world employment 2nd and 3rd preference dates can be expected to be remain in effect well into, if not beyond, fiscal 2025.
And do you think there'll be a carve-out or a different date for Mexico or Philippines, or do you think it'll stay the same as rest of world?
For Mexico, that date will remain the same as the rest of world dates. There just isn't that much Mexico employment demand. The Philippines' third preference, my guess is the fact that they're retrogressing the date will allow the Philippine third preference date to remain at rest of world. I had mentioned in earlier podcasts, I thought that the Philippines' third date may have fallen behind the rest of world date, but that comment was based on the assumption that rest of world third would be advancing through the end of September, and that is not to be the case anymore. So again, I think that the rest of world dates will apply for the current countries, being Mexico and Philippines.
So they're already telling us it's probably going to retrogress in July and then August and then September, of course. So probably there's not going to be any forward movement in those categories. So that means for our HRs that you're going to get a lot more people wanting green card sponsorship because they're going to want to lock in that priority date. We're seeing more people asking to be sponsored under the national interest waiver, the EB2 category, just to lock in that date. So I think that's probably what my prediction is what we're going to see, because once employees start seeing that the dates are rolling backwards or they're not moving at all, they start panicking a bit and they're going to start asking, when are you going to file my perm? When are you going to file my green card application, so that they can get their place in the queue?
Yeah.
Any other things, Charlie, you want to share?
One thing in that regard, since we have been advised that there are likely to be rest of world employment second and third priority date retrogressions, it is extremely important for anybody that has a May or June visa appointment, which has already been scheduled. It is extremely important that you attend that interview. And if by any chance you have a refusal, attempt to overcome the refusal during your month of interview, because a number would be available for you at that time and during those months. But come July, even though you were scheduled in May or June, if your priority date is not within the final action date announced in July, you will be out of luck.
Yeah, so I think that's also a good reminder for anyone whose date is current, is to go ahead and file your adjustment of status, because you may not be able to file it in the month of July. Well, with that, thank you, Charlie, for giving us this quick LinkedIn Live. Again, we will also have the bulletin where we'll go into more in-depth analysis of the June visa bulletin and Charlie's predictions. So again, please follow the Bulletin podcast on Spotify or subscribe to the WR YouTube channel. The link is available in the comments. If you have any questions, please submit them via the survey link or add them in the comments, and we'll respond to them in our Bulletin podcast. And then please feel free to reach out to any of us if you have questions about how to plan and strategize your company's green card program with Charlie's visa bulletin forecast in mind. We're happy to talk through with that in a one-on-one capacity. And finally, please also share your feedback and suggestions with us. We love to tailor these live streams and future episodes of the Bulletin podcast to topics that the audience is most interested in delving into. With that, thank you, Charlie.
Take care.